Greetings. Welcome to my channel, Authenticity. I'm joining you once again, live in the flesh as a vibration, here to pay it forward consciously. This is a special video for me because I received a request from a good friend of mine, Katie, to make this video and discuss my perspective, which I've done in the past. And I really want to do that more on this channel, and that is for you guys to message me. And if you're curious as to my perspective or different perspectives on something that you may be stuck in, please share with me and I'll create a video just for you. So, specifically, with the topic we want to discuss today is attachment and non attachment. And we'll get into the different many levels of this, but I'd like to first start, as usual, by taking apart the word itself. Now, attachment comes from, we can break it in half, attach and ment. Okay, so ment is from the Latin mente, which is for the mind. Okay, ironically, government is the same thing, to control the mind. So we can see now that we form an attachment in our mind. Okay, so right off the bat, just from the etymology, we can see that attachment itself has to be dependent on things, and that is a belief system. So we have to have a belief first in order to attach to something, and we're going to break this apart in depth. But just to start out, you have to attach in your mind first for something to become an attachment. Okay, so let's take this apart. Attaching in the mind, is there like a tentacle that comes out of your mind? And let's say I wanted to attach to this camera, can I go and attach to that camera and then it becomes mine? You see, we learned this early on in our developing as this idea of ownership. And we learned very quickly about where we stood in class structure with how much stuff we had compared to other neighbors and people around us. It goes deeper than that, though, that we learn this idea of math. And because of learning math, which is not a natural thing in nature, it's not. We can use certain things like Fibonacci sequence, the golden ratio, to see how math can play out in geometrical patterns, but it doesn't mean that math is not just an invention of human consciousness, because it is. Okay, so let's start there. We learned the concept of subtraction, okay, taking away from. And in my opinion, this is what happened when we learned math. We learned lack, okay, because the truth of the universe is abundance. I'll give you an example. If I want to go fishing in the lake down the block and I don't have a fishing license, they're going to tell me that if I get caught by a wildlife person that I can't fish there because I don't have the proper credentials or an agreement between people, that I can't fish in a natural body of water to get a fish that they didn't create. Okay, so here we're seeing and getting another glimpse deeper into this illusion that takes place on a mental plane. And that is that, oh, because there's agreements that now we have to abide by that. And the only reason we do abide by that is because it comes with consequences. Okay. So this is important to understand about how we formed our attachment ways. And that is because a system was imposed on us to try to control and minimize. Maybe in certain ways it's good as far as not decimating the population. But the fact of the matter is, it all exists in agreements in the mind. Okay. So on this word level of attachment, we can see that it is an illusion because it's dependent on something and it's not natural to us. When we come into this world, we are naked and have nothing in our hands and nothing in our mind. It can be talked about in other videos or on another level that we have residual in our consciousness from our soul lives, from other incarnations. But we don't, in a way, we're neutral to the point where we're filled up now with these positive and negative charges of concepts. That's what I want you to understand. When we come in, we're basically neutral. Okay. So now that we've covered attachment and how it's dependent on belief systems, and that there's actually nothing that actually changes in the individual when attaching to a possession, something that it now states that it owns, is really just an agreement in the collective. The opposite of that is non attachment, which ironically people like Katie, like myself, like many others in this great awakening who become activated and awake, it's hard for them to understand some of these things that were very second nature for the old person that was in the program of the Matrix, right? So when you awake, you're like, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. Nobody can own the oceans. Nobody can own the land. Nobody can own vehicles. This is all dependent on consequence, the structure of consequence, which is another evolution of our parental discipline cycles, churches, schools, all these institutions used consequences and discipline or the threat of discipline to get us to save these concepts in our mind. And this is one of them, that we can have attachments. We can have attachments. The natural operating mind or the essence of our consciousness is completely, it's like infinite space. It can never actually, everything is contained in it. It doesn't obtain anything. So this is what we have to understand just from looking into the wording and the beginning of how we learn these words that become like spells on the being. We have to really be careful about the language we use. It controls our perception, like government, a way to govern our mental. If you control the perception of the collective, you control what actually manifests. But I digress. Non-attachment is our natural state. So if somebody was to argue against non-attachment, then I would say prove attachment. Okay, that's number one. Prove to me that you can attach to something other than just an idea. Okay? Because even on the level of legality, if you don't pay certain bills to maintain that ownership or whatever the case may be, you could lose, you could get a divorce and now you no longer own that home. There's many different ways that ownership can change. It's it's a it's a attempt to divvy out all these things that are possible experiences and possible physical matter that we can interact with, but there's no transfer of ownership. We don't own anything, okay? And I touched on the fact that we learned math and this created this base foundation for all these other concepts to take hold in our minds, okay? So now I want to go into relationships. And people become attached in relationships, and that is because of the fact that most people have the model of a relationship having to be 50% one person and 50% the other person. I bring 50% and you bring 50%. And that model right there is a recipe for failure because I am not responsible for you. You are not responsible for me. We have an agreement and we continue to have a relationship because we have agreed that we enjoy each other's company. But the fact of the matter is, I'm not responsible for your happiness. I'm not responsible for your breathing. You're not responsible, and so on. So there's a twisted view other than the original idea of attachment of relationships, because the true formula, after you've been through a lot of relationships, okay, which is what I refer to them as, which is the process of the unconscious becoming conscious because of the things that we endeavor to do, and they don't match our expectations, and they turn out to be these huge disasters of failures, but they are the biggest catalyst for our evolution. In my opinion, that's what relationships are for, until we get to the point where we've had enough of that process of trying to understand our childhood and possibly other lifetime programming to the point where the subconscious took hold over those things and made it so crazy, so out of control, because the subconscious is like a little kid that just throws tantrums. It makes us learn these lessons in these situations and events that really are way exaggerated from what the conscious would be willing to experience. So sometimes it has to be full of consequences and a lot of experiences in order for us to finally get it, okay? And to bring the subconscious to the conscious. But so there's no ownership, okay? So when we attach to something, it's because we believe that that thing is going to always be there, okay? And that's just not the way this universe works, okay? There may be people that come into our lives and we benefit each of us from our interactions, and it's preordained or predestined. But then there's people who are lifers, and there's people who are just fleeting breezes that come in, do what they're supposed to do by contract, by some type of universal agenda, because you know it. As soon as you're interacting with this situation of people, you're like, wow, this is crazy. I can't believe that this is working out this way. But so with relationships, 100% on one side of the fence, 100% on the other, and then you become a beneficial mirror for me in my environment that I see, look at you, I see wholeness, I see freedom, I see a conscious being that understands it doesn't have to blame everything that it's experiencing on the other person. This is the definition of a true relationship, okay? A lot of relationships get you to the point where you stop seeking a relationship, do the work, okay? And then you get to the point where you're in a position to actually be emotionally balanced, mentally balanced, and physically balanced for the most part. And then, like I said, they become and you become a complete mirror of that wholeness, that completeness, so that if you're having a bad time or you're having a bad day, I'm not taking that on an empathic level as directly from me. It's not my contribution to that. So the reason people get attached in relationships is because they're not understanding that in the beginning they love the version of themselves that this other person allows them to be. And a lot of the times we have to break down those walls, okay, that we had to protect ourselves. And when you're with the right person or the right energy, it's a lot easier to be vulnerable because you see them as yourself. And once you get to that level of vulnerability, now you are saying things to them and sharing things with them that you wouldn't have with someone else because you knew that would have pushed them away. Okay. But now you're understanding that, wow, I can show you my dirty laundry. And because you're not judging me in a way that you benefit my belief system. Okay. And then I'd like to talk briefly about the three diseases or the main programs in the human being. And that's how it applies to this understanding. And they are that we start out learning that I will love you if, because of different structures we have and things that we have to do that come with consequences, we quickly learn, or it's quickly mirrored back to us, that we're not enough unless we become that version in order to check all those boxes for other people, places, and institutions. So that's constantly mirrored back to us, and that morphs into the second poison or disease, which is I am not enough. Okay? So, enough, I already explained, comes from that idea of lack, which is really just because of math, and we're not understanding our abundance, which ironically, once we awaken or we're activated, we understand that we are a well of being, and that knowing the human, which I'll do another video on, the human is the program, the being is the truth. The fact that from the minute we incarnate to the minute we disembody, we are that I that is constantly shining. So even on the spiritual level, it's giving you evidence of that abundance. It just takes a lot in someone's lives to come to that realization, unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to look at it. The third disease or poison is reality is something that is created out there or out here. But the fact is, and when you understand that your world is your mind, you understand that reality is created here. Okay, so those are the three, we could call it results of this idea that most humans operate from, which is I am not enough, I need to obtain in order to be enough. Even if somebody has gone up a couple levels in that awareness and they understand, oh, I don't need to have that major, that beautiful car that's going to put me in a bad situation financially. Oh, I don't have to have that 10 as far as the scale of, beauty of a woman, like, or a man, either one. Like, you get to the point in that, on that level, that you realize that you don't have to play that game. Well, that's a micro version of a macro thing. And another video that I haven't done yet, which I will is talking about the core rejection. And the core rejection is basically the catalyst for those three diseases I talked about. And that is being dropped off on a planet, not knowing who we are, what we are, why we are, and then being born to people with, we have a subjective mindset that will never understand us, and being dropped off by some creator. If you're conscious and aware, you know that something created you outside of your parents, or if you were born in a test tube, it's the same thing. There's an intelligence that created you, but it kind of is a rejection of sorts because we separate. This is where the illusion of separation comes in, and we start to believe that we need to do things to get back to the whole or back to the hive, whatever you want to call it. So we covered a lot of things in this video, but specifically how attachment is of a mental understanding. And I want you to think about that how many things go through your mind that are complete nonsense that you've actually grown past. Well, attachment, as I've explained, hopefully I've explained it well enough in this video, that it's not natural. It's not ideal for you to even function from that idea because, again, you're born alone, you die alone. On an earth mind understanding, that's basic. You're born alone, you die alone, okay? But on a spiritual level, you are one with everything, right? So there's no separation. You don't need to attach to anything. That, to me, attachment is a attempt to get back to actually to solve the core rejection. Everything we do is an attempt for safety and love, which in actuality, if you look at it, is really just a feeling of completeness and wholeness. So if you're coming at things from and bringing this true understanding of that you are already complete, that you're already whole, then where do attachments fall into that? So I think I covered attachment in detail. And I would just like to add that it's not easy. I wouldn't say it's not easy because that's putting a spell on it. It takes a little bit of integration, a little bit of marinating, or a little bit of allowing. That's the best word. Allowing these new understandings to take shape, right? I shared in another video that my overarching idea, I'll post that video, the link to that video in the description, but, the overarching idea is that, I know that I need to reprogram my mind and my nervous system because most, if not all, that I was programmed with keeps me from living my truths and aligning myself with natural law. Even though it seems scary, here's the key thing. You have to understand that within the program of breaking free of that, it's a lot easier when you've had a powerful experience because now it's not just intellect. Now it's not just rationalization. You actually have something to base it on. And I'll do many videos about the process of what happens to us physically and how we start to think different and see things differently once we've been activated or awakened. So, again, this is a special video made for a specific soul. But if you have a deep burning desire and you feel from what you've witnessed from my expression that I have the ability to break it down in maybe a way that you've never seen before, or are interested in seeing how possibly another being views these same things, then I want you to subscribe to the channel, number one, but also like and comment and give me some things that I can break down for you. And I'll see you in the next one. Thank you.